This is vk3sl. Test missions on 160 metres and 2 metres. Narrowband FM mode. Evening sessions. This is the late night graveyard shift, where we play various incarnations of modulated sound in a very ad hoc fashion. It's all very serendipitous. We just sort of go with the flow, and stuff happens. We just grace the airwaves with usually original material. The idea is, where possible, to play original recordings. I don't know if it's going to happen quite so much tonight. We've just been looking through the playlists and things, and I've only really put this together in a short time ago, but I'm more interested in forming getting everything set up for Mr. JR, who we hope to invite in about an hour's time. So stand by for that. That'll be the interesting part of the program when we have Frank, and we're trying out Zoom. We're going to try and see if we can get a Zoom contact working on these late night missions, and I will really value having Frank's input. So we'll just sort of banter away, I suppose, and see what happens. But in the interim, we'll just sort of get things going. I've only just walked in. I haven't tested things properly here, so I'll do a few checks and balances along the way. But in the interim, we'll start off with some Charles Penrose on an old HMV, the Laughing Jazz Band. This is vk3sl.
I'm the merry leader of the new jazz band. People love to watch me and declare I'm grand. When playing at a nightclub or at a cabaret, I'm just tickled to death to hear the things folks say. The clarinet just giggles, such a giddy laugh. Listen now, it's off again, doesn't it sound daft? It sounds so shrill, just fancy. Now, isn't that like Nancy? At a famous nightclub called the Uncle Joe, Laughing Sam the waiter ambled to and fro, hypnotized completely by the mellow saxophone, wanted to have and play one all his very own. His plates and hopes were dashed one very boisterous night, as he tripped and heard that sax gurgle with delight. Sam was so excited, and we were all delighted. It's funny when the trombone starts his little game. The antics he gets up to really is a shame. When you hear him blare it, you'd think that he would tear it. He's just going to give the pep and no one's got to share it. The trombone with his to and from is always good for charm. Just hear him when he breaks into his brazen laugh. It sounds so very jolly. You can't be melancholy.
Well, Charles Penrose had so much energy, and he made a lot of laughing records. I remember as a 10-year-old going into 3CR on Ralph's program on Steam Radio. My father took me in back in the 70s, and I remember one of the first records I heard was Charles Penrose singing The Laughing Policeman. And I remember thinking, oh, this is such strange, such weird music, and I was hypnotised, and something very strange happened thereafter. I've sort of been in the groove ever since, unfortunately. So there we go. There's a bit of a formative experience. Now, what else have we got? We've got a Vita Tonic on the table from this afternoon. We had emissions this afternoon. We're doing them every day at the moment. It's sort of a bit of an obsessive, mad experience, I suppose. And we just yes, every day I come here at 5 o'clock and wind up the gramophone and put on a 78 and say stuff and let nature take its course. But yes, I've just got to get this out of my system. It's, as I've said before, it's the veritable sandpit. Yeah, anyhow, but we always begin these afternoon missions with Vita Tonic, a Vitaphone associated recorded program service disc. And these are care of Mr. J, who's listening in, and Mr. J has very kindly bestowed upon us quite a collection of these, and there's a lot more where they came from as well, so we've sort of got almost an endless supply. But these are hi-fi recordings from the 1930s. They're pretty extraordinary. The quality is just something to behold, really. So we'll just get the needle in the groove here. We've got the buyer on, and we'll have a sample. And I have no idea what this is. I think it's Harry Tweed and his orchestra, who are evidently a pseudonym for somebody else. So we'll have to do some further investigation. But let's kick off.
For two can be a cozy rendezvous. The patter of the rain makes a lover's lane of a crowded avenue. Cloudy skies are so blue for those who wander two by two. But I don't see the sun, I'm the only one neath one umbrella for two. Raindrops teeming on every happy pair, they go dreaming, everyone a rainbow millionaire. One umbrella for two can be a cozy rendezvous, but no one seems to see there's no one here with me neath one umbrella for two.
vk3sl testing on 160 and 2 meters. We're listening to selections on a Vitatone associated record. Now, I think we'll continue. Track 2. Is it a locked groove? Is it? No, it's not.
written in the stars, those tiny little stars, that you should be the one to love me. In your horoscope lies my only hope of love. I see by every sign our love would be divine if we could face the world together. You and only you can make my dream come true, sweetheart. If you seek happiness, a perfect happiness, the kind I can see, your place is in my arms, forever in my arms, until eternity. It's written in the stars, those tiny little stars, you should be the one to love me. Don't let romance wait, we're in the hands of fate. I know because it's written in the stars.
Heard Harvey Tweed and his orchestra. Who was Harvey Tweed? We need to know. Who's he a pseudonym for? HT. So there we go. There's a challenge. I wonder if there's anybody out there who can rise to the challenge. There's the prize of a Vitatone disc. You can have a Vitatone blank. And we'll need to find out who these artists are. It's a mystery. And because everyone recorded for the Vitatone project under pseudonym, so it seems. So yeah, and there's some amazing artists. I know there's some Ray Nobles, and there's Al Bowleys, and there's even Fats Wallers. There's all sorts of amazing stuff turns up on this label, but we don't really know who they are until we either tell by their voices, or we can perhaps refer them or compare them to known existing recordings. But I don't have that breadth of knowledge. I'm just an amateur missions here on 160. Yes, I mean, I'm discovering as we go. That's the thing about this for me. I don't really know very much at all about any of these subjects. I'm seeing it as a learning experience, and this is an excuse to discover the collection here. Much of the collection here has been in storage forever and a day. Many of the 78s here have really only been unpacked since I had my midlife crisis. They were stored away in a garage for decades and decades, and then sort of unpacked in recent years. And this is what's happening, folks. This is the grand unpacking happening over weeks, months, years. So yes, it's a process of discovery. Now, amongst all the junk is another turntable. We've had a lot of trouble lately. We've had difficulties with humbuckles in the system. It seems to be unresolvable because I've tried everything I know. And there's RF getting into the turn arms, and I might have to completely rewire them, and that's not going to happen any time soon. So there's two turntables here which I now just have to relegate to preview tables or use them for other purposes, but not for missions anymore. So that's sort of a nuisance. So I've instigated another turntable dedicated to using the mag pickup. But that's got issues too. It's an old CE. It was under the house, and I picked it out and I pulled it out and I've lubed the bearings and put the motor back in. But the motor doesn't start. It needs to be wrestled into action. So there's some work to be done there. And I think AC motors have a little sort of a turbo thing in them to give them that nudge. But look, we'll get there. But I've manually started it now, and I've got it down here to my right. So this is the fifth turntable in the room. It is really quite obsessive compulsive, isn't it? 5 turntables surrounding me. Anyhow, this one here is on my right hand side, and it's quite accessible. And I'm hoping to at least just try it out in principle. So I've got a 78 on the platter. It's a 78 from the late 20s. It's Victor Arden and Phil Oman and their orchestra. Sometimes I'm Happy is the name of the track. And we'll put the needle in the groove. There we go. And we'll see what happens. Testing. on 160 and 2 metres, vk3sl. Something's supposed to happen. It's not. Oh, maybe we're not connected. I'll check further. Oh, that's an anticlimax. Because I was hoping that would happen. I was expecting to have a result. And we're not. Well, I did test this earlier. Turntable's going. Pickup's in. Record's on. It's connected. But I'm not getting anything coming out. That's weird. Alright then, well we'll sort of have to... what should we do? What can we do? Alright, we'll have to resort to secondary systems. And that's what happens here. It's all ad hoc. I'm whacking the mouse, waking things up. And do we have anything else? Oh, here we go. Here's one we've had this before, but it's a good stopgap, I think. So let's have a listen to Phil Spitalny and his orchestra by Mr. Prozoot, and we'll have Putting on the Ritz until we can get ritzed into gear.
Blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where Harlem sits, putting on the Ritz, spangled gowns upon a bevy of high brows run down the levee, all misfits, putting on the Ritz. That's where each and every Lulu Belle goes every Thursday evening with her swell goes rubbing elbows. Come with me and we'll attend their jubilee and season spend their last 2 bits, putting on the Ritz.
Test missions on 160 metres and 2 metres, and they're still going. I like all these songs on a minor key. It's good missions fodder. Ah, a different version of the same piece. That's interesting. Wonder what this one is. Ah, maybe it's a different take. I wonder. Well, it's good to hear. It's a good song. It's a song that speaks of the times. Yeah, Phil Spitalny and his orchestra. What does it say? Does it give us any more information? I don't think it does. It's one of Mr. Prozoot's early uploads. Okay, well, I think we're fixed up on the other system, so I might fade it. Although it's sort of drawing me in. Now I have to say that 2-second gap issue on YT is to do with a bad driver, I think. I reinstalled the drivers on the Putes, but it didn't work. So there's another issue. One for the log. We wrote all these things. This is what testing's about, of course. We create a log of all the issues that arise as we do these test missions, and then slowly, over the ensuing months, we slowly work through the problems. But it's going to be a nuisance if we have 2 seconds drop out of every song on YT. So I've got quite a bit of YT lined up later on. Never mind. We'll continue with this, and then we'll have our CE special. And I don't think there's any more. I think that's it. I think that's all we've got on that file. Mr. Prozoot putting on the Ritz. 1930, Phil Spitalny. Okay, well, I think we're all right to go with the C table down here to my right. It's sort of low level. I'm going to have to build it up and mount it in the desk. But we're going to try it out tonight. It's spinning well. We've got a record on, and I've just had to resolder something because one of the leads came off. So one of the contacts came off the head shell, the magnetic pickup. So we needed to do a quick on-site repair. So luckily we've got a soldering iron on the desk here. So I reckon we're right to try this now. So what do? We switch things on. We lean over in the groove, and fingers crossed. vk3sl.
Sometimes I'm blue, my disposition depends on you. I never mind the rain from the skies if I can find the sun in your eyes. Sometimes I love you, sometimes I hate you, but when I hate you, it's 'cause I love you. That's how I am, so what can I do? I'm happy when I'm with you.
vk3sl testing, and we're trying out the CE table here to the left, or to the right. And okay, it seems to be all right. It seems to work reasonably well, and there's no problem with speed or polling or any other nasties. So the motor is quite okay once it's going, but it needs something to start. It's the size of a washing machine motor. They're incredible, these things. Yeah, so we'll continue with that. Well, let's find another 78. Let's find something else to try out in live mode. That's the name of the game, folks. We try and do play live recordings, mining the collection here. Much of this material has not been listened to for a very long time. What's this one? I wonder how I look when I'm asleep. Well, Waring's, Pennsylvanians. That sounds very compelling. I came in here half asleep. I was dozing. Now suddenly look at the clock and it's 25 past 11. I'm starting to wake up now. You probably could tell I was sort of out of it, but I'm always out of it. I wonder how I look when I'm asleep. Let's put it on the platter. You can use the needle again. I don't think it matters. vk3sl testing.
I wonder how I look when I'm asleep. I wonder, how do I look when I'm through counting sheep? Oh, tell me, the secret if you tell me I will keep. I think I'll spend the day in Philadelphia and find out how I look when I'm asleep. I wonder, how do I look when I am in the middle of a snooze?
Oh, told me, I should ask you. Give us me a dough. Do I look cuckoo when the cuckoo sip?
While you're in your lovely. Now I lay me down to sleep till I feel the bed bugs creep. Then you'll have to get up. I'll have to get up. You'll have to get up some morning to find out how you look when you are
Rock in the cradle, sound asleep.
Yes, and we could hear Billy Costello there. The original Popeye is on that record. And thanks to Wayne for your email. I've just been reading that. That's great. You've got some great suggestions there too, which I will sample. I'll have a listen to those, and we'll find a way of putting them into the feedback loop. That's great. I'm open to suggestions, and this is good to have people's inspirations at hand. So thank you. Good news. All right. Well, it's already after midnight, and in about 20 minutes' time, I'll be cranking up Zoom, and we'll have, hopefully, things will work out, and we'll have Frank with us. So I'm looking forward to that. There'll be a whole new dimension to these test missions. But before we do that, I'm going to play a couple of selections from Marjorie Stedford, Australian singer, born in Balaclava, locally. And I didn't know much about Marjorie Stedford. She was just a name. And we caught up with Mr. J last week. He was over and he played me a transcription record which melted me. It was beautiful singing, a really lovely low voice. And it was Marjorie Stedford at 3DB with William Flynn and his orchestra. And, I can't wait to get a copy of that, because that'll really add a whole new dimension to these missions, having some of that series. And anyhow, I'm quite hooked on Marjorie, and I didn't realise that she had a very distinctive career in Britain in the 1930s before coming back to Australia in wartime. And it's great. It's fascinating. There's a whole raft of recordings, and they're terrific. She's a great jazz singer, fascinating, lots of personality, really good voice. I like a low female vocalist, and she's got that quality. So look, I'm going to play a few. There's a few online, and I'm trying to pick the ones which aren't over-processed, which is not altogether easy. But we'll listen to a few Marjorie Stedford. So, I don't know, this one is I'm Living in a Great Big Way is the name of the track. It's from about 1934. I don't know who she's singing with. Does it say? It does. Yes, Jimmy McHugh and Dorothy Fields. Oh, they're the writers. No, it doesn't tell us who the band is. It's probably DeBroy Summers or someone. Anyhow, let's have a listen to Marge, our local Marge. vk3sl testing. Isn't she great? It's Marjorie Stedford. from the early 1930s. That's one of the records that Mr. A put out, I think, in his compendium. There's more. There's some great material. There's one called Black Coffee. Where is it? It's such a great song. I heard it earlier on. Where is it? It eludes me. Never mind. We'll find it. Might find it afterwards. Here's one I played earlier in the week on the afternoon missions, and it's a recording she made with Mario Harp Lorenzi, and his rhythmics. It's great to hear some jazz harp. You don't often hear that. She made quite a few records with Mario's band, and that's another story. I mean, look, there's so many tangents there. This is a great Australian artist who's more or less forgotten now, and I'm just so impressed. I think she's got a wonderful voice. Let's have a listen to this, and I'll see if I can find Black Coffee. vk3sl testing.
Some of these days, you're gonna miss me, honey. Some of these days, you're gonna be so lonely. You'll miss my hugging, you're gonna miss my kissing. You'll miss me, honey, when you're far away. I'll be so lonely, just for you only, babe. 'Cause you know, honey, you always have your way. And when you leave me, you know it's gonna grieve me. You're gonna miss your little baby, some of these days.
Well, there we go. That was Marjorie Stedford, Australia's own Marjorie Stedford, with Mario Lorenzi and his rhythmics. Doesn't the harp sound amazing as a jazz instrument? Great combo. And she's a good jazz singer. She's on the beat. She's got the style. She's got the inflection. What happened? Why do these people evaporate? It's probably the war. That's probably what did it. Yeah. Such a shame because there's so much talent, and they did make quite a few records. Now I did find Black Coffee. This is a terrific track. This is Carol Gibbons with Marjorie Stedford and Black Coffee, recorded in 1935. This is vk3sl.
black coffee, I see double. Ooh, ooh, ooh. How am I gonna get home? Black coffee, I'm so dizzy. Black coffee, please get busy. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Help me so I can get home. Had a little too much hoopy soup. All I meant to take was one. Now my head is going loopy-loop. Some stuff, hey kid, what fun, oh. Black coffee, help a fella. Black coffee, what'll I tell her? Ooh, 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 I'm afraid to go home.
Carol Gibbons and his Boyfriends with Marjorie Stedford. Black Coffee, recorded in 1935. And sorry about the gaps there. There's a little gaps. Unfortunately, it's something I can't control. I'll reinstall the drivers. I'll try and do that. But, you know, it's another thing for the list. I keep a list here. But it's like stuff around the house. There's big lists of things to do everywhere. And only slowly do things actually happen. It's just one of those things. All right. We are meandering along. We've got about 10 minutes before we call in Frank, and I think I will pay a little tribute to... Well, I found the very first recording that Vera Lynn made in 1935, and it's amazing to think that she lived right until... Well, she only died last week at the age of 103. And of course we all associate Vera Lynn with all those wartime songs, and she's sort of an icon figure, really. It's not entirely within the passband of these missions, nor is the style, but some of her early stuff is a little bit more upbeat, and yeah, so I think we'll feature this. This is an 18-year-old Vera Lynn in 1935 singing "Love is Like a Cigarette." What romantic words. Okay, let's have a listen. This is a very scratched up old film with Joe Loss and his orchestra, but we'll put it on and we'll have a small tribute to Vera Lynn. vk3sl testing.
Love is like a cigarette. You know you had my heart for long. Like a cigarette, I never knew the thrill of life until I touched your lips. And
and that's all there is. It's off an old newsreel, I think it is, and there's a few copies, and they're all got the same breaks and cuts, and yeah, it's a pretty damaged copy, but you know, it's a document, and that's where it all started for Miss Vera. She's a child, really, in that recording. So yes, and to think that she was alive, she's probably one of the few people who had a career in the 30s and who is still alive. In fact, there's actually documents, I think she actually did stuff in the 20s or early 30s as well, but that's the first known recording, I think. So there we go. Vera Lynn. All right, now I might play, say, if I can find it. We were looking through the shelves the other day, Mr. J and I, and as I said, a lot of the shelves here have been unchecked. We really just have no idea what's here. And they keep discovering things, and that's one of the sort of the fun things about doing this, is it's full of new discoveries. And amongst them all is an acetate of, which says, I'll bring it over here. I just hope this is going to work. It's an old Fransol record, and it says, Miss Prescott presents your own on 3XY in 1948. So, well, this is on a Fransol acetate recorded in Argyle Street, St Kilda. So let's have a listen. We'll give it a try, and we'll sample this now and see if it works. I just hope it does, because these turntables have been problematic of late. We'll just keep our fingers crossed. vk3sl testing.
Do you prefer, just for your own special listening?
I much prefer the classical music for listening.
Mm-hmm. You're very definite about that, aren't you?
Very definite about the listening,
Yes.
but for dancing I much prefer the rumbas and sambas.
Well, that's interesting. You like the music of the South Americas for dancing, do you?
I do indeed.
Well, you've got a lovely program this afternoon. I don't think I've heard this melody on the move myself. Charles Shadwell's orchestra, composed by Richardson. He's writing a lot of the English film music, isn't he? Background music for film.
Oh yes, quite a deal.
That's one of your favourites, is it, Miss Prescott?
I think it's the best opening number that I could think of.
Very good. Well, we'll be happy to hear it. Melody on the Move, presented by Charles Shadwell's orchestra as the first number in Miss Prescott's program this afternoon. Well, so far so good. It was a lovely opening, Miss Prescott. Now, what would you like for your next choice?
Joseph Smith singing This Is the Happiest Day of My Life,
And why do you like that one particularly?
because it's such a happy song. You could really believe it was his life.
Well, that's very, very nicely put. And here's Joseph Smith to present Miss Prescott's second choice. This is the happiest day of my life.
There we go. That's off an interesting home. I won't say a home recording. It's a special issue, and I dare say it must have been a program where people could come along and present their choices. I don't know what the significance of Miss Prescott is, but anyhow, and evidently they gave them a sample copy. I think that's what this is. There's a few more on the other side, so we'll just explore this, and then I'll start to get Zoom up and running too. So hopefully we'll be able to call in Frank soon. So Miss Prescott, number 2 side, 3XY, the 12th of the 3rd, 1948. It says it's on a Fransol acetate. So let's see what happens. What she got to say?
He is one of the finest tenors in the world.
Of all time?
Of all time.
I'm inclined to agree with that too. He's got a very true tenor voice. There's no faking falsettos in his top registers. He really takes those notes, doesn't he? Well, that's very nice to hear you say that. Well, now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a brand spanking new disc on the turntable now from Miss Prescott's third selection. It's the Austrian Peasant Dancers. Miss Prescott has brought her own record with her. We have it in our studio, in our library, but this one I think is in slightly newer condition than ours, and we do hope you're going to enjoy it. Might I ask you why you chose this selection of Austrian peasant dances in your program, Miss Prescott?
They're the gayest selection of dances that I've ever heard, and I am keenly interested in folk dancing, and that is why I included it in this program.
Well, that's very nice too. Do you do much dancing?
Not a great deal.
What a pity. And what stops your time mostly, I suppose?
Yes, time doesn't allow usually.
Well, here it is, the Austrian Peasant Dancers, and it's played by Walter Gehr's Symphony Orchestra. Well, Miss Prescott, that was... Well, we still have one of your favourites to play, Debussy's Clair de Lune. And why do you prefer this one? Any particular reason why it's one of your favourites?
It is such a gentle...
Well, I think that's a very good word, too, to use in association with Clair de Lune.
Gently.
Doesn't it, eh? It sort of... Yes, it does. It more or less insinuates itself, doesn't it? Clair de Lune. Well, here is Miss Prescott's final choice for this afternoon. André Costello-Metzner's orchestra play it, Debussy's Clair de Lune. Presented this afternoon by Miss E. Prescott of 13 Hennessy Avenue, Elwood. Now, Miss Prescott, before signing you off, it is my pleasure now to hand to you, with the compliments of the management of 3XY Melbourne, your broadcasting fee of half a guinea.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, Miss Prescott. And now, ladies and gentlemen, before we go into our program of ballet music for the afternoon, we'd like to let you know that our next listener is Mrs. Dodds Wilton of 16 Southey Street, Elwood, who will be in on Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock to present the program, which reads very, very nicely too.
Whoa, there we go, straight across the label. Yes, and a bit of hum there, but it's acceptable, and it's such a poor recording anyhow, so there's a novelty. What happened to Miss Prescott? Who was she? That's an interesting one, and maybe we can do some investigation there and find out what the background to that program is. Now, what headphones have I got on? I've got one around my neck and one on my head. I'm going to just quickly do a swap because I was monitoring off 2 meters, and we'll put the other ones. That's better. They're the headphones from the desk, which means that I can move myself around and look at Zoom. Now, what I can do is, while I'm getting sorted with Zoom, I'll have to call in Frank very soon, and I think what we'll do is have a little bit of Lyda Roberti. We heard Lyda Roberti last week with, who was she? I can't remember who she was with now. I will in a minute. Anyhow, she was singing a selection last week, and she should have been the Marlene Dietrich, but and sadly she died very young. But here's one of her great, a very seductive track from the early 1930s. vk3sl.
Take a number from 1 to 10, double it and add a million. That's how many nights I keep longing for you. Take a number from 1 to 10, double it and add a billion. That's how many dreams I keep dreaming of you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 bed rhymes with heaven. And your kisses rhyme with heaven too. Honey, once you got me, take a number from 1 to 10, double it and add a zillion. That's how many thrills I get. That's how many chills I get. On the day when you will say, I do, I do, I do.
And we're standing by now. Yes, I can hear you, Frank. Welcome.
Brilliant. Well, thank you.
I can. It's very good copy. In fact, Zoom is excelling itself. It's a good situation.
There's only about half a second latency.
Is that right? Okay. Oh, that's
or
good to know.
perhaps a second.
Sure, but I presume you're monitoring off.
I'm on 160. I will turn it down, I think, because it's a little bit disconcerting.
Yes, it could.
Yeah.
Yes. So, can you monitor off Zoom itself with the headphones on?
To. If that doesn't work, I can easily crank up 160.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
What would you prefer that I did? 160 is no problem.
No, you should be able to monitor off Zoom, Frank.
I should.
Yeah. So to see if that works now, because I've switched you in, because you weren't switched in before, and now we've done that. So that should now hopefully work.
I can hear it very low level background.
Okay. Can you? Is that better?
That's much better.
Okay. Yeah.
Give me a little more. Oh, beautiful. Perfect.
Yes.
Now it's as loud as you are.
That's it. Yes. Well, I'll let this track finish, and then we'll be right to go.
Excellent, Steve.
On the day when you will say, I do, I do, I do.
Whoops, turn the mic on. Yeah, that was Lida Roberti from 1934. And of course, we were listening to recordings with her and Eddie Cantor last week. There was a couple of selections. You might remember those. Yeah, so Frank, how's your...
Steve.
Yes, this is good. It's working very well. Nice solid signal on your part. And your
Excellent. And no extraneous noises?
No, that's rare, isn't it? I've have to touch wood and fingers
Not
crossed
really,
and
but
toes
it's delightfully
crossed.
quiet.
Yes, it's holding up, isn't it? It's good.
Beautifully.
Yay. Oh, good. Well, how you been?
Good evening to our many listeners.
Well, that's it. Now, I'm sad to say that the streaming service is not doing what it should. So I don't know how I can get in touch with Jamie at this late hour, because he may be wanting to listen in. In fact, I'm hoping he's aware of the YouTube. He may be, but I think that, it's a dynamic...
Worst case scenario. If the worst case comes to it, he'll be able to hear it on recording.
That's it. Yes, there is that alternative. Yeah.
So hi, Jamie, whether it's now or in delay.
That's it. And unfortunately, yes, there's a dynamic IP address, and it does strange things to the server, and it's just not going at all, and I can't do anything about it tonight. But it should be working okay on the YouTube stream. And I should mention that because YouTube is the new go-to place. And, there's a streaming service runs there for the entirety of the program, and all you need to do is just type in my call sign, and that's the name of the channel. Yay! So
Very good.
So
I'm enjoying it so far.
Well, it's been a bit of fun. I've been sort of settling into the rhythm of it all.
I haven't heard that laughter man before.
Charles Penrose, English
He's very
comedian.
happy, isn't he?
He certainly is. Bag of laughs. Yeah.
He reminded me a little bit of that famous Rudy Valley recording where they tickle him when he's singing
That's
Cabin
right.
in the Town.
That's it. That's the one with the mouse. Well, apparently the mouse ran across the stage. I think there's
Oh,
different.
is that what happened?
There's a few sort of maybe apocryphal tales about
There are
it.
a few versions of what made him laugh.
I think there are.
But it was certainly genuine laughter, wasn't it?
It was. He was in hysterics. Yeah. And so Charles Penrose made a series of laughing records. And
Yes.
I think that's all about morale boosting. And
Have you had any information about Harvey Tweed?
I don't know
Since
anything about Harvey Tweed. We need to investigate. We need someone who's in the know, who knows what the Vitaphone pseudonyms were. It'll be
He
a well
reminded me a little bit. The orchestra reminded me a little bit of Lawrence Welk.
Okay. Right.
So
Maybe.
play it. See what you think. Play it back. It just occurred to me.
Yeah.
The sort of tweety sort of
Okay.
orchestration.
Sure. I'll have another listen and see. Maybe
See what you think.
Yeah, maybe that's who they are. Early 30s. It goes way back. So yeah. Well, it could be anyone, and I don't know who the vocalists are, but it's all in code. So it's just a big question mark. We don't know who's on them.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Now, Marge Ditford is something else, isn't she?
oh, she's wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah,
amazing
good voice.
Yeah.
And a lot of style about her too.
I think so. And she's got the
A lot of
swat.
style, the way she sings. She's got some nice jazz chops there,
Yeah, I
good
think
intonation.
She does, and I love her. I love that range in a vocalist, and
Down a bit. It's got depth, hasn't it?
it certainly does. Yeah, she's
Got
great.
depth.
I didn't. Had you ever heard of Marjorie Stedford before?
No, I had not
She
heard
was
of her.
never on my radar. Now, apparently, she died in 1959, I think, and she was about
Okay.
50 at the time. Jamie
Yes.
said there was substance abuse issues, or there was a bit of a sad story towards the end. So maybe a little bit like Janet Lind when she came back,
Yes.
returned to
yes.
Australia during wartime, and then maybe didn't quite succeed in the way she hoped. Perhaps, I don't know. Yeah, but
Talking of Lind, what about poor old Vera?
oh yes,
She's
yes.
what? Well, she only lived to be 103.
Only
wasn't
103. Yeah, extraordinary.
What an icon, though.
Oh, extraordinary. Absolutely. She's sort of the voice of the times, isn't she? I mean,
She's the voice, and not only of the times, but apparently since the lockdown, people have sort of got a bit of the war mentality and sort of we've all got to stick together sort of thing.
Yeah.
And she has an album in the top 40.
how extraordinary is that?
Isn't that amazing?
Isn't it just amazing? I hope, well, I don't know what sort of state she was in the last months, but it'd be lovely to know.
Oh, the album, of course, is long ago recorded.
Yeah,
stuff.
but would have been nice for her to know at least that her records were still being listened to on mass.
I reckon she would have known.
I hope
reckon
so.
Certainly she would have known.
Yeah, there's a number of interviews.
As long as
with
she
her.
was reasonably compos mentis.
Yeah. There's a number of interviews with her into the hundreds on YouTube. I mean,
Yes.
she was.
I must listen.
Yeah, she was very astute. There's no loss of faculty at all. And
That's wonderful. And isn't it amazing to hear her very young?
oh yeah. She was only 18 on that recording.
She still had that amazing quality, though.
Yeah.
That sort of, I call it vibrato, but it really wasn't vibrato because she didn't change pitch at all.
No.
It's just a tremolo. It's a lovely sound.
Yeah, it is. It is very centered tone to her voice.
Yeah, very, very. That's a very good word for it.
Yeah, she's a very direct communicator, and she's got the body language, and she's got the engaging personality, even when she was young.
Yeah.
So you can tell that she had a successful career ahead of her. But yeah,
She was a showgirl through and through.
I think so. Definitely. Yeah, all right. Well, I've been sort of putting together a few little things here. And so we've got a bit of a list here. Now, one of the themes during the week was, I've looked at a couple of pioneers in electronic music, and there was that, did you get a chance, there's a program about Indian electronic music, which I played the other day.
Loved it.
You may not have heard
I'd
that.
actually heard some of that just fortuitously on a program on the ABC.
Oh yes, I think that was actually Mr.
It was Andrew
Mr. F.
Ford.
Yes, I think Mr. F did a interview with the guy who put that together.
He
I
did,
think that's what
yeah.
sort of spurred me on a bit. I think I heard that.
Right. Well, it was a very good spur because I enjoyed listening to it. I actually recorded it the second time when you played it. So
okay, sure.
Fascinating stuff, and to be so old, to be stuck away for so long, and then unearthed.
Yeah, so they still haven't found the Moog synthesizer. I hope they find it.
Yeah, that's right.
A Motterbud, yeah.
That's the one.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Just think
It certainly is.
Out there, out and beyond, they were doing extraordinary things. Very interesting, and the variety of different approaches and the different philosophies, and some of them were trying to emulate what they thought was animal language, and others had a more of a space age sort of concept, and the difficulties some of these individuals had trying to sort of I don't think many of them sort of progressed much beyond that sort of early experimental phase, really, which is all a bit sad.
I think they realised that they had some potentially really great instrument, but they didn't quite know what to do with it.
Yeah, I get that sense.
And they're doing what you would do. They're just trying out different things and experimenting.
Yeah.
I think we've kind of gone a lot further now, and we're incorporating it intelligently into music.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a very different consciousness now. It's true.
It is. Well, that's just the effluxion of time and people living with it and working with it.
Yeah. Look, it's a really interesting social story. The whole business of electronic music and how they sort of embraced these technologies, and how it was very much a niche sort of out on a limb. It wasn't something that was in any way in the mainstream. And but now, of course, with dance music and other forms of electronic music, it's certainly assumed something very different. But I also I had a bit of a listen to some of Laurie Spiegel's work, and she was with the Bell Labs, and she's still alive. She's in her 80s now, and she was quite prolific in the 70s using Bell Labs, their mainframe computer, and she programmed it and did amazing things. But the story with her is fascinating because she was responsible for the music on the Voyager record, on the disc that went out with the Voyager spacecraft.
Really?
So,
really?
And I think that's an extraordinary tale in itself, just the whole business of that.
The Voyager record. I've always maintained they should have released that as a saleable item.
Yeah.
And I think thousands of people would have bought it.
I think so too. Would have been a great celebration of humanity, and I don't know why they did. Maybe there was all sorts of silly contractual issues, but
would be that
maybe. But look, anyhow, I thought
you would think anybody who had made any of the recordings would be very proud to have it.
You'd think so. Absolutely.
You would.
Definitely. Well, look, I've got a little. I'll play this now. This is a part of. I played the first part of a doco on Laurie Spiegel this afternoon, and this is another 7-minute segment. So maybe we'll have a listen to this, and
sure.
So. And then there's a small excerpt from the record itself, which I'll play as well. So that'll sort of set a little bit of a scene. Now, Frank, are you able to listen on 160 because what I'll do is I'll switch the mic off, your mic off while we play this.
Very easily do that.
Yeah,
Steve.
and then we'll come back after it's finished. So
very fine.
Terrific. Okay, let's have a listen then. This is Laurie Spiegel with Wave Shaper. And this is part 2 of that interview we heard this afternoon. vk3sl testing.
I was sitting around with some jazz friends up in Woodstock, and we were all actually rather stoned at the time when this call got forwarded up to me from my home phone down in New York, and this voice said, "We would like to use some of your music to contact extraterrestrial life." And I thought, who are you? Come on, what kind of a joke is this? Can you send me like a confirmation on NASA letterhead that this is legit, figuring I'd never hear from them again, but they weren't NASA, and anyway, that just happened.
In the late summer of 1977, 2 unmanned spacecraft, Voyager 1 and 2, lifted off from Cape Canaveral atop Titan Centaur rockets. Traveling uninterrupted through interstellar space, the Voyagers will endure forever, long after everything man has ever built has crumbled into dust. In the event the spacecraft encounter alien intelligence, both Voyagers carry a copper phonograph record, a message, celebrating the sights and sounds of Earth.
And it's the first cut on the Sounds of Earth record. It's not actually with the music, and it's not actually a musical composition of mine. It's a realization of Kepler's harmony of the planets, that they move in harmonic relationships with each other, and that the ear of God can hear these harmonies of the celestial bodies moving in their cycles and their rhythms, and that maybe someday there will be a way of making this audible to the ear of man. And at that point, that was 1977, there was a way, and so I cut it up and entered all of the astronomical data and made it sound as good as I could. I chose to use only the planets that were known at Kepler's time, so Pluto wasn't in there, and he's been demoted from being a planet since then anyway. Poor little Pluto. Kepler was this obsessive, amazing person who, from Platonic times, from the music of the spheres, they thought the orbits, would be circular back in the, Pythagorean and Platonic, the ancient Greeks. And Kepler went totally crazy for quite a few years trying to reconcile the astronomical data with that, but it turned out that he had to come up with, pretty much invent the ellipse to explain these orbits, because they were not uniform, they were not circular orbits, they were elliptical. He was a genius, but he was obsessive. He kept at it till he figured it out. I love science too. I think Bell Labs was a natural in a way, partly also because I am part scientist. I always loved science when I was in school. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronomer. I wanted to be an oceanographer. Chemistry was one of the best courses I ever had in my life during high school. I would stay after school blowing things up in the chem lab fairly often. And during the Vietnam War, when they were actually hiring girls for the jobs, that if they hired a guy, he would be immediately drafted as soon as he got out of school. So they couldn't. So there were all these jobs open to young women that weren't open normally and were shut down after the Vietnam War ended, which is partly why we got feminism in the 70s. But I worked as an analytical chemist at underwriters' labs on the basis of an absolutely insanely great high school chemistry course. And I liked logic and I liked math, and I felt at home in a lab sort of atmosphere. So Bell Labs was a good fit for me. And it was a fascinating place. I mean, everybody in all the other little rooms on the floor were all totally into working on something that they were excited about, because it was still an era of pure research. It was very long-term thinking. As today, everything's very short-term. They upgraded and decommissioned the computer that we had been using for music and replaced them with newer modern computers that none of our software carried over. They ran different languages. We lost everything. Everybody just really lost everything. And that was followed not much later by the divestiture, the AT&T divestiture, where they broke up AT&T and to all these smaller competing companies, and that ended pure research, really, for Bell Labs, one of the all-time great research institutions, pure research institutions on the planet ever. And then people started being expected to produce innovations that would lead to an income-generating product within a given time frame, as opposed to leading to a Nobel Prize or coming up with something that you don't have any use for yet, but will, like the transistor or the laser or all the other amazing things that had come out of those labs.
It's vk3sl testing on 160, and Frank, are you there?
Oh, Steve.
Yeah, good. Coming through well. Yeah, so there we have it. That's Laurie Spiegel giving her...
What an interesting person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she was quite a maverick, really, and she's...
I don't know of her. I didn't know of her.
Yeah, likewise. It was an interesting discovery. I just struck upon her somewhere. I was reading about something. So,
Has she put out very much stuff?
She has. She's put out quite a few albums of electronic music. And over the years, over the decades, and she invented a sort of intuitive ways of engaging with devices, and I think some of her discoveries are part of now some of the software that we just use as standard software to build up compositions, things that intuitively make chords or create context to sounds. So
I'm particularly interested in that field of activity.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of scope for it. Without some people say it's too dehumanizing, but I think with human guidance and human input, it can be a whole valid field of creativity.
Totally. I'm sold on it. I think so too. I think, just to be able to invent new sounds, new combinations of sounds, and just find, interesting way, just invent sound worlds. And that alone is a justifiable thing, I think.
Sure.
I think it's important. Yeah. There's an example here of her, of that disc, a section of it anyhow, from the Golden Record, The Sounds of Earth. So we'll have a little listen to this now, and for maybe just a couple of minutes of it and see how it goes. So this is Laurie Spiegel's composition, and it referring to Kepler's Harmony of the Planets.
Spheres.
Yes, Music of the Spheres. Yeah.
Oh no, that's the Greek one, isn't it? The Harmony of the Spheres.
Yes, that's right.
Pythagoras, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
But he was okay.
Sure. Okay. So this is okay. So it was Pythagoras was Harmony of the Spheres, and I think the music she was talking about that she drew inspiration was Kepler. Kepler's.
Kepler was. That's right. He was the first one to discover that the planets orbited around to have a mathematical proof.
Okay. Sure.
That happened, which was a most incredible thing.
Yes.
Because it was sort of all done by deduction, and I've actually read quite a bit about that.
Right.
And it is totally mind-blowing how he did it, because he didn't have a lot to go on, and it just took years and years of solid working out of mathematical formulae and observations made largely by him, but more by Galileo and other people.
Right. So he was largely on his own, was he, with the whole? I suppose he wouldn't.
Yeah, he was. Gosh, he was, and finished up with he was the first one to come up with this result.
Okay, sure. So this is an homage to him. Yeah.
Very much so.
Okay, it sounds amazing. All right, let's have a listen.
Okay.
So I think what we have then is a series of environmental sounds that they're sort of mixing out with the music. And so I think that's the way it sort of presents. And I think there were two records. One of them had the environmental sounds and the other one was more art music and stuff like that.
Sure. Yes, there sounded like a lot of water there
Yes,
somewhere, wasn't
yes,
there?
water. I think the rocket taking off. There's sort of sounds associated with the Voyager, the whole sort of...
Oh, yes, the Voyager.
Yes. The way the spaceship was launched and everything else.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting theme. So there's another series, there's another part to that series featuring Laurie Spiegel. So I'll put that on during the week and flesh out the topic. There's a large amount of her music. I played about an hour, about 45 minutes of it today. And that's from her Harmony of the Worlds. That's the series
I missed this afternoon.
No, it's fine. And but that's...
We had a visitor, strangely enough.
Okay.
We're getting a few visitors.
That's
now.
good. Yep, sounds like...
He's very good.
It's nice to know. Nice to hear. I'm glad. Yeah.
The timing was a bit wrong for me, though, but never mind.
Not to worry. No, that's great.
Not to worry.
Yeah, so anyhow, we might hear a bit more of that Harmony of the Worlds at some stage. I've been sort of saving a few little things up that have taken my interest during the week. And... so putting together a little bit of I won't say a playlist, but just a set of possibilities. And now I know that we've talked about the theorbo instrument before in Baroque music. It's like an enormous lute, and it's often used as a continuo instrument. And it's a part of the continuo lineup in a Baroque ensemble. It often takes the place of a harpsichord, but it's a remarkable instrument, and it's like a massive lute, and the thing's about 10 feet long, and it's got resonating strings, and it's a fascinating instrument. I think there's only a few people have really mastered it, and so they're in high demand when it comes to ensembles. But I thought it'd be nice to listen together to this. There's a little program here, says from the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment, called Introducing the Baroque Theorbo. I think
Wonderful.
So it's Theorbo.
Theorbo.
Yeah. Okay.
Theorbo. Yeah.
Theorbo. So
they usually say, I think, that you've got it.
I think so. I'm not sure. So anyhow, look, this could be interesting. And then I've found a couple of items of fretworks as well. So maybe we'll have a listen to this, and then maybe it's a bit of fretworks.
What do you think of them?
I think they're wonderful. It's a really interesting sound world they inhabit, and it's great to hear the viols, the viols. Yeah.
Yes.
And they're ancient instruments, aren't they?
No, I know. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's very, very tranquil, very peaceful. And
it's wonderful to hear the art of fugue played on it.
Yeah, sure. That'd be good. And I'm just wondering if I've got something on. No, that's okay. It's fine. So what we'll do, we'll have a listen to this little chat about the theorbo.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
And then we'll continue and have a little bit of fretworks after that. VK3SL with VK3JR.
At the end of the 16th century in Florence, something strange happened in the musical world which had an impact on lute players, but also singers, stage directors, choreographers, and this was known as opera and musical theatre scenes. So the small lute that everybody had been happily playing for centuries, on which beautiful, very intimate counterpoint, polyphony, very complex mathematical music could be played, wasn't quite pizzazzy enough for the new forms of theatrical music. So the players were scurrying around with their lute makers, thinking about what they could do to address the challenge of playing with louder singers, coming in maybe on a cloud, accompanying somebody you can't see. They needed a bit more beef and a bit more welly for their money. So this is one of the things that resulted. Hieronymus Kapsberger was one of the pioneers, but the person who claimed to have invented this instrument, the chitarrone, or theorbo, as it would be called, was Alessandro Piccinini. And he said that his great innovation was to invent a second neck. If I point up there, that's the second peg box, this is the first peg box. So essentially, I'm playing a lute with an extra neck. Piccinini called his invention the arch lute, and other makers at the same time were working on a different kind of prototype called a chitarrone. This was meant to evoke the music of the spheres, the ancient Greek kithara, and was a very intellectual enterprise. However, because it looks a bit daft, it acquired a second name, a tiorba. So you have kithara for ancient Greece, and tiorba, which was essentially a country instrument, some old geezer playing a hurdy-gurdy. And what I love about the instrument is that these two identities, the serious one and the daft one, existed and still coexist. When I catch the tube in London, the capona or the blockhead identity comes out. People complain a lot about the space that I take up. The other interesting thing about the instrument is that the top string is buried in the middle. It's a little bit like a ukulele. And this is because half of the instrument came from a bass lute, and the other half was kind of grafted on. So in order to get strings that would be this long to have the big resonant sound, different strings had to be used. If you used normal gut, it broke. So the solution was just to tune these down the octave in order that you could have the extra length for this octave, as some of the soloists would play it. But this meant you could play you had a considerable range, but going downwards instead of upwards. And as the strings are made of gut, I'm going to have to tune this one. These two features of the instrument are what give it its slightly eccentric character. So you have the bass strings going down, sometimes even arpeggiated, or very sad. Which lent itself to the kinds of improvisation that were going on in opera. For example, this C minor chord would ring on, and along comes Penelope in Il ritorno d'Ulisse to sing a lament about her long-lost husband. So laments, vocal accompaniments were what the instrument was conceived for. But of course, once you put a piece of kit like this in a player's hand, they'll do other things with it. So because of the tuning, I now have a lot of strings tuned a tone apart. So although we're in early music territory, this gives me a lot of harmonic options. For example, so all those clashes which we wouldn't normally find in music of this period are suddenly very gratifying to play under the hand. And we even have Turkish influenced pieces such as florence also a piece by Kapsberger called a colazione, which was a 3-stringed Turkish instrument. So around 1600 there's all sorts of innovations happening. So what could you use this instrument for if you're in an orchestra or in a band or in a theatre? Improvisation comes very naturally. You build it around chords. And to do that, rather than have all the composers learn lute tablature, they wrote just one single bass note. So a single D could mean or the same D could mean depending on the mood of the piece. So theorbo players learn to improvise, to harmonize their own particular bass lines. They might share a line with a harpsichordist or a viol player or a harp and play in big groups, or sometimes just one voice and one lute was the kernel from which larger operas were built. So Italy was the nerve center of innovation where this instrument was invented, but it did travel. It traveled to France, where interestingly it lost its chitarrone name and became the theorbe or theorbo lute. And also it ended up in England, where it was a theorbo. And theorbo came to mean just the word for anything that had an extra long neck. And in different people's imagination, the instrument took on a different character. So we had all those clashes and dissonances in the Italian music, but the French used it for a much more melodic purpose, things like this. And then dance music. And so on. So it was then used for playing in suites. So you could play in one key for a while before you would have to stand up and retune to change key. And this is where the suite came from. You'd have a whole group of pieces, all in D major or C minor or B minor. And this was a particular French invention around these tunings on the lute. The theorbo went to England as well. It was brought in by Inigo Jones in the 1600s, but he was stopped at Dover at customs as they thought the instrument was a popish engine to destroy the king. So the theorbo got confiscated and not reunited with its owner until some time after. Me and airport officials across the world have a similar kind of relationship as I travel quite a lot with this instrument these days.
vk3sl testing, and we've been listening to an introduction to the Baroque theorbo. And Frank, I brought you back in.
Yes, thank you. Isn't that fascinating?
Isn't it just? It's amazing. It's an overgrown lute, an elephant lute.
Who would have ever thought that it could be mistaken for a fiendish, popish engine?
Yes. It looks pretty foreboding.
Destroy the king.
Yes, it's true. But it looks like it's just enormous. I mean, I think the neck would be 10 feet long. It really
must be hard to move.
It would be very hard to move around. I don't know. It's bigger than a harp, and I mean, it's probably not terribly heavy. It's got the standard lute sort of geometry, but it's just got this extraordinarily long giraffe double neck, and I think it's the resonating strings. That's for the resonating strings. The other set,
it's got 7 pluckables from the sound of it.
That's right, and I think the others are just sort of sympathetic resonance.
They're passive resonators.
That's right, exactly. So, but what a beautiful sound!
A lovely sound. I've got a few albums by a group called La Peggiata,
the
European group.
Yep.
And they play early music mainly, and they use the theorbo a lot.
Do they? Okay.
I've got one in particular which is called Tarantella, and it's a record of all manner of tarantellas, and the theorbo is very much to the fore.
Okay. That's because the tarantella was a dance for the tarantula bite, wasn't it, originally?
Certainly was, yes.
Yes, that's
it
the
was.
story. Yeah, yes. I'm always telling my
so.
students play tarantellas, and I'm always telling them the story of the tarantula.
It's a great story. I think it's based on truth, actually.
Yeah, I think so. And it's usually got a triplet rhythm that sort of
Yes, that's right.
Self-perpetuating sort of.
That's
rhythm.
right. That's right. And it very often ends up in a frenzied sort of climax, you know.
Yeah, sure. That's good.
Because people used to dance literally for hour upon hour and become kind of entranced and hypnotized by it all.
And the adrenaline rush, I suppose, as well.
All of that. Yeah. And that was supposed to get rid of the poison.
Okay, it's incredible. Well, look, how about find a, if you like for next week, if you would if you find something of one of your recordings, even just list it, send it across, and we'll look it up on YT and feature it, because that'd be nice. It'd be great to flesh out the subject. I've always enjoyed the lute, and a bass lute has particular appeal.
Yes, but the theorbo adds a lovely grunt to if I can use that word, to baroque, because it really sets the bass line very well.
It does. And I like its, as she said, it's sort of eccentricities for improvisation because of its passive strings.
Didn't she do well? She's obviously she's an expert.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
what was her name?
I don't know, to be honest. I'll have to look it up. Does it say her name?
Doesn't matter,
there?
but I just thought I might have heard of her.
Yeah,
she's obviously a very much expert person.
Definitely.
But it's got great...
Elizabeth Kennedy. Elizabeth Kenny. Elizabeth Kenny.
Yes. Yes. No, I don't.
Yeah.
Yes, so she certainly brought out the scope of what it can do, didn't she?
Oh, definitely. No, look, it's a wonderful, it's a whole sound world. The particularly in opera, it's associated with Italian opera and small ensembles.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, from the
Look, without wanting to change the subject too much, one of the things I did through the week as a kind of a response to your having mentioned it it might have been in a coffee break, I went on the net and learned a lot about the bass ukulele.
Oh, did you? Really? Fantastic.
I did. And the sound it's not the same, but there are similarities.
Yeah, sure.
And the various types of bass ukulele.
They are amazing.
So I'm wondering if that might be something else that we might.
That's a good subject. I'd like to flesh that one out. Well, certainly a very strong topic here, because we've got a U bass player in the house, and I'm hearing it every day. And I think it's been quite a distraction from the study. But I'm fascinated by it. And the thing I think that really emancipates that instrument or makes it work is the strings. It's got these rubber strings, but it's a very dense rubber. And
yes, I think it might be a neoprene, actually.
Right. Okay. Is that what it is? How interesting.
I read an article that said that's what, because the problem was to get a string that was once not too thick, but still dense.
Yes, that's right.
So that you've got the mass.
Exactly. And you've got to be able to have an instrument that it has to have a certain density. So they try and find that trade-off, and then they've designed an instrument that it's bigger, but it can't be too small. Otherwise, it has to be at a point where the strings can still work in that range. But,
now there are two types of, as you would know, two types of bass uke.
Yeah.
Does the one that you're hearing, is that a solid body one, or is it an acoustic?
It's
more
an acoustic one. It's an acoustic one.
That'd be the better ones. I
Yeah,
should think.
so there's a certain amount of natural resonance, and
Yeah,
so you
well,
can
that's what
actually
you'd
play
want.
it, and you get a woody sort of sound. It's really
Yes. Well, the solid body one, as you'd expect, it doesn't have so many harmonics, and it's more just of a sort of a dry thump.
Yeah.
Than
that's right. It is. Yeah. There's
that's just done. That's done with a pickup, with electric pickup.
That's right. Yeah, definitely. There's a guy. Here's a track. Here's a track of someone playing a bass uke. And I might have played this the other day. Yeah, let's have a little bit of a listen if I can quickly dial it up.
Very good.
Oh, I'm trying to get quick at this, but it's not entirely quick. But we'll give it a go. Okay.
All right.
I'll keep the mic on. So here we go. There we go. That's a fellow in his bedroom. It's just playing one. That's the same one as Mr. H has. So
okay. So look, it's not going to replace the Theorbo, but it's got a lot going for it.
It's got a lot going for it. They're percussive. They've got a nice sort of body to the sound, and
nice woody, as you say, a woody sort of sound.
It is. It is a sort of a woody sound. So I'm impressed with them. I think it's a new.
And how big would that be?
It's not that big. It's smaller. It's smaller than the guitar. Much smaller than the normal guitar. And it's about halfway between
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's not a lot bigger than a ukulele, really. Possibly half as big again than a uke.
Okay.
So yeah, they're not huge, and the strings are they're as you say, European or whatever the type of rubber they use.
Which is a kind of plastic, I think.
Yeah, sure, but it's very
rubbery
dense.
Plastic.
It is, and
yes.
it's got a certain sort of texture to it, so you can get your fingers around it. So it's quite and it uses two sets of pickups. But what we noticed in the shop was that there's different types of. A lot of it's in the preamp as well. The preamps really do a lot to determine the sound, especially when it's amplified. So
you're probably getting a lot of internal bass boost. Do you think?
Yeah. I think you might get. I think it relies on its natural acoustic properties as well.
Sure.
Yeah, but so there's a few.
It sounds quite acoustic, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah, I think so. That's what I like about it. It's sort of.
That's what I'm saying. It's not. It's not a totally electrified, thing that hasn't got any sort of, expression to it.
Yeah. It's got texture, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's the word. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes,
there's a sort of texture to the sound. It's sort of a dynamic sound, not a completely inert sound. I always find that playing instruments. I used to be in a heavy metal cello group. I used to run one. Yeah, and playing Metallica and heavy stuff, and we'd all dress up in skulls and make ourselves look really horrible and leather and stuff and face paint. We had a theatrical person who dolled us all up, and we did quite a few gigs. And it's really visceral stuff. It's high energy, and yeah, but those instruments, those electric cellos, we play pogo stick instruments, which are bodiless cellos, and so they're just like a neck and a bridge on a stick, really, and they've got like
that was the original electric guitar was like that.
Okay, really?
Or I'm not sure about the original one, but the one that Les Paul made, the first one he made was a solid body,
right,
and just a stick, with pickups.
Really? Okay, interesting.
So I heard.
Okay,
yes.
I'll have to look up and see what I can find out about that. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, it is most interesting.
Yeah. These inert instruments, they're really difficult because you don't get any feedback. Usually with a resonant instrument, like when I play the cello, the whole instrument's constantly vibrating. I mean, the back of it's vibrating, the everything's vibrating. The bow vibrates. You can actually feel the pitch. If you really tune into your playing, you can feel the pitch through your fingers. You can feel it. And
someone like Evelyn Glennie would be able to, wouldn't she?
Yeah,
she'd probably be able to actually play it.
Yes, well, that's a fascinating situation with her because she was just so sensitive to vibration. Yeah.
We must talk about her one night, perhaps.
We must. In fact, there's a really good TED Talk with her, and it would be good to play that and we'll have a chat about it because I think that is a really her whole her life is just
Incredible.
incredible.
It's almost unbelievable, but it's true.
It is. It's just phenomenal what she was able to achieve without any hearing, but all done through feel. But I can understand with now we're going back to what we're saying about electric guitars and things.
Yes,
instruments that are inert, it's wanting in a way, and I think to just have some acoustic, some breathing, some natural sort of resonance, even if it's subordinate to the amplified sound, does make a huge difference in my experience.
It's a form of feedback, isn't it?
It is. It is absolutely. Yeah, it's a really interesting one. But I used to find that with the electric instruments, I'd overplay because you're yearning to get that.
You're trying to generate sound because you're expecting to hear this or feel it.
Exactly. You want it to vibrate. You want the neck, and you want to feel it, and you just can't because it's just it's just got no resonating chamber. So it's an interesting.
I heard the electric violin. I haven't heard electric cellos. That's something else again.
Sure, they're very similar. They're similar concept, but
it's a powerful sound.
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, you can do anything with it. You just basically it's.
Imagine.
Yeah, they are, but no, it's an interesting topic. So yes, the U-bass featuring very strongly in our.
I think it's fascinating.
It is. It's good.
And it would be open to a lot of uke players who perhaps just play the uke for fun.
Yeah.
And this would give them a whole new dimension without having to acquire a new skill.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly does. It gives them a whole new function. I mean, you can have it's basically a bass guitar,
Yeah.
And I mean, it does. It's got a peculiar because the neck's so short and all the frets are closer together. Henry, he also plays the bass guitar as well. He said does he really? Well, yeah, only because he plays the double bass and.
Of course, yeah,
and they all go together. All go together, really, same technique or same essence. But the neck on the uke is much shorter, so everything's in sort of you've got to sort of truncate. All your gestures are sort of are very local to the strings. And
the other variable or the variant that I read about on U bass was fretless or no fretless, fretless or frets.
Sure. Yeah. That's interesting. The one we have here has got frets, but I think I like the idea of fretless instruments because I like to be able to control.
It gives you more scope for being expressive, doesn't it?
Absolutely, you can use expressive intonation, and that in itself is a wondrous thing, but it requires a lot more technique.
Sure.
You can't be a millimetre out,
No, that's very unforgiving indeed.
Absolutely, you have to really have that three-dimensionality in the way that you stop the strings. Everything has to have a three-dimensional form, really.
It really play into the hands of violin players and indeed cellists.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the essence of our technique is all about shapes, intervals in terms of shapes.
But you've got the muscle memory to not need frets, sort of.
Yeah, but the muscle memory is sort of generated in relation, not only to the strings in relation to each other, but the fingers in relation to, the shape of your hand and the shape of your arm at any given point. So there's sort of...
Indeed. It all plays together, doesn't it, I imagine?
It does.
Integrated.
It does, very much so.
Wonderful thing.
It's interesting. It's a very interesting subject, the whole idea of creative intonation and all the things you can do and to heighten expression through varied intonation. Now, I had a couple of other things. Well, we'll leave because there's a beautiful excerpt here of the Goldberg Variations with the viol consort.
Lovely.
Yeah, so maybe it goes for a bit, so maybe we'll save that one. Save that one for next week, the fretworks, or maybe
I'm rambling on too long, I think.
No, not at all. Or actually, we could play it because we won't need to chat too long afterwards, will we now?
No, but we're having our chat now, aren't we? Really?
Yeah, we're doing it now. This is good. Well, let's see. Let's have a listen. I'd love to hear it. Yeah. So this is one of the variations. What does it say? I can't see. Variation number 1. So this is fretwork. The band or consort of viols, and playing Bach's Goldberg Variation. So let's have a listen. VK3SL and VK3JR. Okay, vk3sl and vk3jr. We're listening to Bach's Goldberg Variations, a transcription for viol consort, and the group was Fretwork.
That was most interesting. The one really interesting thing was that Zoom didn't like it.
Ah, really?
No, it didn't handle it at all well.
Is that right? How about that?
I wouldn't want to be having a viol lesson over Zoom.
Well, it sounds a little bit like what I was experiencing.
It would be quite vile, I should imagine.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's interesting. So have you got the settings optimized for voice? Or I'm wondering, because there's a couple of settings that you might want to play around with in the audio, not now, but another time.
I will. If I can. I did have a bit of a look for them.
Yeah, it's embedded a bit. So you have to go into another layer and of advanced settings for audio, and you can turn off your background noise. There's something that limits distant background noise and close background noise. There's two settings.
Some sort of threshold.
Yeah, there are, and they do get in the way of modulated sound.
All right. Okay.
So that's just one to try out. Yes.
But it was interesting because I've always listened to a little bit of everything else you've played since we got on. Onto Zoom, and most of the others have come up fairly well.
Sure.
But the especially when it's playing loudly.
Yeah.
It didn't handle the viol at all. It was just went into bad distortions and.
How about that? Interesting.
Very bad artifacts indeed.
Yeah.
It sounded like you could hear a lot of scraping. It sounded as though it was being played very badly.
Yeah, sounds like it was trying to sort of, it was interpreting it, the algorithm was interpreting it as being noise and trying to block it out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But that's exactly what it sounded like.
Yeah. I used to find it's interesting observation, because I used to find sometimes when I'm teaching the sound would completely disappear.
Yeah. Well, this chopped out sometimes,
really?
and it was all you heard was a sort of a hiss.
Oh, yeah, that's the experience I had too. Yeah, so look, it sounds like you might be able to get around it to some degree anyhow with the settings. So it'd be interesting to try that.
I'll find those settings and I can save them, can't I?
Yeah, they're default settings, absolutely. So once you've set them, they're there forever. And it's only really for noisy conference and environments. They're the defaults because most people would have a degree of, but most of us, it's not an issue. So I'd recommend that. But
excellent, thank you.
But it is an interesting point. Beautiful.
And I did love it. I loved the music.
Oh, it's really from the earth, isn't it? That music.
It lends itself. I mean, the Goldbergs you can play on, like so much of Bach, you can kind of play on anything, but it really lends itself very well to that. To those instruments.
I think so. There's a lovely sort of
tranquility about it, isn't there?
I think so, definitely. And it's, I don't know, I like the way that there's a natural resonance, an overtone series without the vibrato. You get a very different quality to the sound,
and you can hear it all so clearly, can't you?
Yes, you can.
And the interaction between the harmonies themselves, which is the interaction between the instruments.
That's right, exactly. So the instruments excite each other. There's a synergy. Yeah, sympathetic vibrations. Now, the viols have always been a fascinating sort of. It's a beautiful aesthetic. It's very quiet. They're intimate, and it's not many concerts of viols around anymore. They're really obsolete. Well,
yeah, it's a bit of a shame.
It is.
But,
yeah,
the
only viol instrument that survives is the double bass.
Is that a viol? Oh, is it
yes,
really?
The double bass is not a member of the violin family. It's a viol.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
Now this is. I'll dine out on this trivia question.
It is absolutely a member of the viol family. It's got the sculptured shoulders. So, and it's got the C bouts on the sides, are of a slightly different shape. They're more of a sort of a deliberate C rather than a pointed. There's a different shape, and they're a flat back instrument, whereas the violin family have got a curved, a rounded back,
curved back. Yes,
So the model is quite distinctly different, and especially the shoulders. It's got sort of a shoulder. So that's the double bass.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
So it is a viol. It's not a
viol.
It's not a violin.
Okay. then of course we got the viola.
Yeah.
Which is something else again.
That's something else again. That's a violin, really. It's just a big violin.
Yes. We're big violin.
A tenor violin.
Yes. You hold that under the chin, don't you?
Yeah. Yes. Your viola you hold under the chin. But see, originally there are others. There was a piccolo cello, and there were bass cellos, and there was about 6 or 7, and it's narrowed down to 3 or 4 with the double bass. So that's a convention that sort of changed over the centuries. Yeah.
And then there's the viola da gamba, of course.
Or the viol and viola da gamba da gamba is the larger one. It's the cello.
So that's really the same thing.
Yeah, it is. That's what they had a gamba playing in that last recording we just heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then there's a thing called a viola d'amore.
Yes, there is. Now that's another one.
Do you know what that is?
I'm trying to remember. I should know. We had to study.
No, not at all. But I'm just curious.
No, I know what it is. But I just can't picture it.
Yeah, sure.
But yes, it's related to the d'amore. I'll look it up. I won't try and guess.
All right. That's your homework for next week.
Yes, it is. That's it. The d'amore. Yeah, but that was great. I really enjoyed that. I'm not.
Yes, so did I.
Yeah, it's not something I'd listen to usually, so it's good to sort of be prompted. It's nice. I had a couple of other quick things here too. It's been good. These afternoon missions, hearing all manner of things, it's been the best thing in the world for my listening. I'm listening to so much more music now.
That's great.
Which I'm really
yes, and you've remembered how good the Jupiter Symphony is.
Oh God, yeah. It's such great music.
I
remember at uni. I remember having to analyse that piece and completely deconstruct it, and I remember at the time thinking, this is just miraculous. The whole way, all these themes and subordinate themes, and the way that they, there's so much information, and the way it just seamlessly just moves and melds. It's just it's remarkable.
It's almost as though he knew that he didn't have long to go.
I wonder.
And he wanted.
Yeah, I know.
It's just silly supposition, really, but it's certainly, to me, he takes composition to a new level in the last 3 symphonies, and in particular in 41.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a whole new. It's a dawn of a new era, and it just never really got to express itself fully because he tuttled.
Yeah, tuttled, unfortunately. And you could say that Beethoven sort of picked up the mantle, but he took it in his own direction.
Yeah, well, he had his own sort of, and through his own personal tragedies.
Yeah,
but there's something incredibly, it's almost impulsive about the way Mozart's written. It's so, I don't know, the way. It just seems to me like it's a remarkable inspiration, like a moment.
Yeah, it does. It's inspired, and it's got that sense of almost spontaneity about it, but at the same time it's combined with amazing counterpoints.
Yes, it is. But you can hear the last note in the first note. It's one of those pieces that architecturally is just amazing. But the coda is just something to behold. It's so great. Anyhow,
Yeah,
I have to keep listening to it, so I'm going to be boring the listener. They'll lose all the listenership.
No. They're getting to enjoy it more and more, I'm sure.
Well, it's a piece that conductors love to work with, and there's a lot of different versions, and so I'll play a few more and
yeah, why not?
Let that evolve. Yeah. Now, Kate and I were sitting inside by the fire before listening to Lily Pons, and we were listening to recordings of Lily Pons, and I thought, I wonder if she ever sung Handel or Bach. And we did a search, and lo and behold, here is I've got some Handel, and it's very unusual. It's
wonderful.
It's completely fascinating. In fact, I really love it because no one in the world would ever sing Handel like this anymore. And I just think that the more variety of approach we have, but a 19th century style coloratura or 20th century coloratura singing Handel in that bel canto style is...
Why not?
Why not? Absolutely. So let's have a listen to something from Handel's Alessandro from a recording with Lily Pons made in 1940. vk3sl testing. What do you think?
Wow, Handel like you've never heard it before.
It's very different, isn't it? Yes.
I wonder what he would have thought of it himself.
I wonder. No tuobo on that recording. Yes.
That was most interesting. But she was good.
Yeah, absolutely. She completely.
She was fine.
She was on top of it. It's just a really different vision of the work. It's just a different different weighting, different emphasis.
Absolutely.
And, I think, very characterful singing. And
very much so. Yeah.
The unique, she used her articulation, her bel canto style.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way she does it. She made her put her stamp on it.
Yeah, definitely. No, I really enjoy hearing things like that, which are just so not untypical.
Why not? They're very valid. I mean, it's a shame to say, oh well, that's not the way it should be. You know, because it's perfectly valid, and it's just a fresh way of looking at it.
I think so, definitely. No, I just think it's a wonderful personal stamp. Now here we are. Here's one of us singing Phoebe and Pan, Bach's cantata. Now
I know this.
You know
it? I've seen this live, and I heard it sung by the soprano was a woman called Siobhan Stagg.
Oh yeah,
who was now made it big in Europe. She's a local girl.
Sure.
And she's made it big in Europe now.
Oh, how about that? Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's a whole backstory behind this. I mean, in terms of what it's all about and stuff like that.
Sure.
But that doesn't matter for now.
Okay. It's called Air de Momas. It says is the name of it. I don't really know what it's about, but I'll
No.
That's okay. But we'll have it's only short, and we'll have a listen to her sing this now. So we've heard Handel. Now let's have a listen to some Bach. This is. Are you able to listen on 160, or is it what's your preference for?
I listen on 160 to the music because
that's fine. I'll turn
it's never quite as good on.
No, fair enough.
Zoom.
No, that makes complete sense. What I will do then, when I turn my mic off, I'll turn yours off.
All I've got to do is take my headphones off. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but the sound quality ever so slightly degrades on the music with the.
All right, well, turn Zoom off by all means.
No, yes, but you don't need to do anything at all. It's just the switch along with the mic. So yeah, just a simple thing. Okay, let's have a listen to Lily Pons, VK3SL and VK3JR.
VK3JR in contact with VK3SL.
And we're waiting. I think I might have to do another activation here. Wait a minute. Yes, here we go. Should be ready to go. There we go. Yes,
lovely.
It was. Yeah, it was good. So there we have it. Lily Pons singing
very good.
Music from Bach cantata Phoebe and Pan. I think it is. Yes. Recorded 1940. So yes, it's good to find a few non-typical things because that would be, yes, it wouldn't go down too well with some of the early music circles.
She wouldn't have sung too much Baroque, I think.
I don't think so. No, it wasn't her main thing. But
Not her go, really. But
really.
Still, she adapted herself very well.
I think she did. And yes, I don't think there would have been too many Baroque operas at the Met for her. How many she did?
No.
3 decades. Every season for 3 decades at the Met.
Isn't that incredible?
Isn't that amazing? I think from about 1928 to about 1960.
Oh, that must be some sort of record.
I think it is. I think it is. She sang 300 roles. It's staggering, really. So yeah,
it certainly is.
Yeah, amazing, really.
It certainly is.
Sure. Oh well, it's getting up getting up towards 2 o'clock. So maybe we should underscore 2 o'clock as our sort of more or less our past band. Do you think that?
That's when we close down.
Yeah, I think that could be good. Well, I'm very happy to go to 2, but I think otherwise we could end up going all night.
Well, that's right. It's very infectious, and I've strung it out by my incessant rambling. So
no, not at all. It's great, Frank. It's working really well, and the system's holding up, which is good. I'm going to have to reinstall drivers in the computer because it's really frustrating when it just stops in the middle of a track, and I don't fully understand the problem, but I'll have to investigate. But
all right.
But that's a little.
It's not happening very much.
Well, yeah, a little bit, but yeah, something for the list. And anyhow, but we'll certainly continue this system if you're happy to call in around that time. And
I love it. I'm loving it.
I think the first hour gives me a chance to sort of settle into a bit of a rhythm with things and get that 20 stuff out of my system. And
sure, that's fine.
And then if anything's going to go wrong, it usually goes wrong in the first hour. So
yeah, settling in phase.
That's it.
No, that's fine.
Touch wood, it's held up reasonably well.
It's gone very well tonight. I think.
So far, it's been.
I mean, the technicality. And the music's always great, of course.
Oh, it's all good fun.
So,
yeah. Now I did have something to wind up with today, and it's also this is very beautiful, and I think I might have played it before, but another very non-PC Bach, and this is Edwin Fischer playing the famous Arioso. It's the middle movement from BWV 1056, and it's a timeless. Just to make the piano sound this lyrical is something that completely is a remarkable achievement, I think. So,
I think this is probably one of the greatest melodies ever written.
I think it is too. I agree with you. It's one of those melodies for all time. Definitely.
It is.
Absolutely it is.
If I'd done nothing else in my whole life but write that, I'd reckon I'd done well.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
It's just amazing.
It is. All right. Well, we'll stand by for that, and we'll say cheers, and we'll probably catch up on there soon. Well, I'm sure there'll be another opportunity this weekend. And
yes, very good. Well, I'll probably be around.
Yep.
I'm not totally sure, but if I'm not, I'll leave word that I won't be.
Yeah, fair enough. And so, without any further ado, thank you, Frank. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, for your input. And we'll finish up with Mr. Fisher, and I'll write out with this. And I won't listen back on anything. I think we'll just let
No. We've had our talk.
I think we have. All right then. All the best.
All the best.
Thank you.
Have a good week.
Cheers for now. And vk3sl thanking the listeners abound for your.
Thank you, listeners. I hope I haven't bored you. This is VK3JR signing with VK3SL.
And VK3SL passing it over to Edwin Fisher. Cheers for now.
Go, Edwin.